Friends, welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart, to find out what gives them their magic. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined as always by my friend, co-host, mulleted teenager, dirt bike rider, Chinese maggot orderer, and co-host,
Alex D'Andino.
Woo!
All accurate.
Yeah, that's right, guys. As always, if you like the show, please take 1 second right now, this very second, pause the show, or do it while you're listening. Leave us a rating and review wherever you find us, especially if that happens to be Apple Podcast app. That helps us out so much. And for those of you who have been doing that, thank you. We have seen it, and we do appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Our numbers have been great. We really appreciate it.
They have. Thank you very much. As always, you can follow, see the faces that match these voices on YouTube. That's Nerd Alchemist, plural, with an S at the end. That's our channel. Go there, subscribe, share it on your socials, which we are also on, all the socials. We're very active on Twitter, especially Film Alchemist 1, number 1. And that's it, guys. That's enough for the business. We're going to start on a bit of a somber note tonight, guys. We interrupted the last week of Fan Pick Month. This is on me. I decided we're going to supersede our last couple selections because filmmaker Joel Schumacher died this week. And Alex and I were talking, and he's just one of those guys that made a lot of movies that meant a lot to us growing up. A lot of the kind of movies that we talk about on this show, a lot of the movies that are the very reason we started this show, right? Joel Schumacher's one of those guys for us.
Which is very weird because you wouldn't, because the thing he's most famous for is like ruining Batman.
Which is horseshit, because I like those Batman movies, by the way.
Look, I love Batman Forever. I don't give a shit what anybody says. I think Batman Forever is quality. I saw it 7 times when I was a kid. I didn't give a shit.
Well, that might be the thing. Also, when you were our age, when those movies came out, they slapped. This was before comic book movies were everywhere. This was before we were, as used to very polished. I just remember being like, holy fuck, Batman. And it was fun. It was great. Yeah,
again, but even more than that, it's a taste.
The movie we're talking about tonight, the one we chose to do in tribute of Joel Schumacher, is The Lost Boys. Now, this is a funny one because I had actually recorded an episode on The Lost Boys with our friend and guest host who you might have heard on the show before, Jonathan Holliday. And we lost it because there were some technical errors. We were doing a remote, recording, which before that was just how you did all podcasts. We like sometimes new guests, you have to figure out the technical kinks for this and that. So we actually lost The Lost Boys in this really strange movie I still want to get to called Head of the Family. But what struck me is when John and I were talking, John talked about this, he had his little gang of friends, and this was the movie they found, and they were like, this is our flag. This is fucking cool. We're Lost Boys guys, right? And I remember that same feeling. And when I watched Lost Boys tonight, I was like, that is... there's this phrase that used to go around a lot, right? The cinema of cool. I think it kind of came in when people are like trying to find like buzzwords to describe like the 80s, 90s stuff. Right. I don't know exactly why that phrase was created or what it means. All I know is that if The Lost Boys is not on the marquee of the cinema of cool, you can burn that fucker to the ground. That's all I know for sure in this world.
Yeah, I mean... Honestly, if you throw a greased up saxophone player singer in a band in a movie, that's pretty much, there is no more cool than that. Again, that should be, by the way, in like the pantheon of like terrible choices in a movie, and it's so
absolutely
fucking
not.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so fucking cool. Like any other movie you would sit there and be like, why the fuck is this patailed fellow playing the saxophone in front of like this huge like group of beach bums? Doesn't matter. It's fucking cool, man. Like that's what again. And this movie has so many different versions of what I think is cool, because when you're younger and you see this movie, you relate to like Corey Haim and his little Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, like them in the comic book shop, they're doing their thing. And then when you're a little bit older and you see people smoking cigs behind the school, and you're like, whoa, are those guys cool? Yeah, of course they are.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
yeah.
where you get to like your Kiefer Sutherlands and your Jason Patricks. You're like, fuck, dude. I might actually get with Jamie Gertz. Who knows? Could be.
Yeah, I remember having that thought. Let me put it this way. I will say this as a young boy in the Midwest of India. No, I'm saying that is how I thought life would go for me. Is that I just kick open the doors of my middle school and there would be a star waiting for me, right? To bring me to a cave and we'll float in the clouds. That turns out not a lot of stars lining up for young
Turns
Joshua
out not true. Not a thing that happens.
It's okay. But what I remember so vividly is how this movie kind of became aspirational to me in a weird way. Because growing up as a young boy in the literally the middle of cornfields in Indiana, that's where I lived. My house right as I was getting into high school, my house was just cornfields on three sides, right? We had moved from a big city, right? Which here in Indiana is not really like a big city. You're just like, dude, we've got an Applebee's. Like, we're awesome. Right? To a one-stoplight farm town, right? Yeah. And so being a kid who grew up there in the life we led, I watched this and I was like, holy shit. Like, Lost Boys felt to me the same as when I saw Star Wars for the first time. It felt like an absolute alien world that I desperately wanted to be a part of. Because it's just like the whole, there's, you can just go to the beach. There's games on the beach. They do that whole opening montage I love of just like this fucking hodgepodge menagerie, right? Of just unusual looking people. Like one of the girls, they just cut to a scene and one of the girls is just licking a rat. And it's just a throwaway, right? That might have just been a person doing that and they just got waivers. And I was like, yeah, okay. Like even those people, it gives this town this weird character already before we even introduce anyone. And then you see Corey Haim, and Corey Haim was such a cool character to see at that age because he was a young boy my age who was actually had some fashion sense and some pizzazz, and he just felt very different than a lot of, the boy protagonists at that age. And then you see the Frog Brothers and you're like, fuck, they're like alpha butch. Like I could never hope to. And so everyone you see in this movie is so much cooler than anyone you knew in life. It was like his mom just is like, I just will get a part-time job on the boardwalk at a video store. I'm like, fuck, that's cool. Like
why can't my mom do that? That's
even awesome. Max, like the douchey guy who tries to pick up your divorced mom, has like a cool like Devo jacket, and I was like, everyone in this movie is just too cool. They're just too cool. So as you said, saxophone guy feels like, wow, look at that. Like that's a bold choice. I can't believe it worked. To me, I was like, somewhere out in the world, there's just the freedom to watch a greased up saxophone man amongst the hordes of weirdos.
It's a thing. Again, it's there's so many things in this, like, I guess not so many things. That's probably like the biggest thing. But there are aspects of this movie that totally shouldn't work and totally should not grab you the way they do. But because of just the time, the place, and the vibe this movie gives off,
yes,
they are so fucking part of like that overall vibe that everything just feels not just cool, but everything feels relevant. Everything feels now. Like even in 2020, we're sitting here in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of an election year. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my windscreen. In the middle of an election year.
I thought you were having a panic attack saying what's actually happening in our real world.
Right. And you're like, you're looking backwards at like 1987, Santa Carla, not a real place, by the way. Santa Carla, California. You're like, oh, simpler times when there were just fucking terrible little vampire biker gangs rolling around. Like, God bless. Like, that's
the good old days. Thing. Classic problems. Yeah.
But that's the thing is, like,
I agree.
Even the vampires are fucking cool. Like, the vampires are these great, like, it's great mashup of, like, 80s cool, gutter punk stuff and biker gang shit that all convalesces into a completely different vampire than we'd seen to that point, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, something totally fresh. And that's the thing that the movie does so well is, like, reinterprets and refreshes a lot of stuff that you probably have already seen, probably has already done. Like, again, one of my all-time favorite lines in this movie is that when the one, I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy is chasing the vampire hunters through the house, and he's like, garlic don't work on me, boy. Like, that kind of shit. Mm-hmm. You're like, man, see, like, that's what I want. Like, little shit like that, little iconography, I'm cool. But to your point about, like, the girl licking the rat in the beginning, just the menagerie of stuff that you get, that to me is what makes Joel Schumacher a great director in this regard, because he's always able to fit random shit into these movies that you're just like, I'm in for it. He did it in Flatliners. He did it in Batman and fucking Robin. He just throws shit at you and you're like, I'm here. Give it to me. It's fine.
Yeah,
I love that about
he always
Joel
gives
Schumacher.
you your bang for your buck. What I actually think Lost Boys is for me is, I was trying to think, and I didn't really have enough time to lay out my actual list of what would be my best vampire movies ever. All I know for sure is that this is a top 5 for me. But and that is one of the things that struck me as a young guy is everyone's always like, which kind of monster would you want to be, blah, blah, blah. We used to do those games all the time. And when my friends would say vampires, I'm like, why the fuck would you want to be a vampire? You live in like a moist old fucking castle somewhere. Like, maybe you got some wives, but they can't talk. They're just hissing at you all the time. Like, there's nothing cool. Like, maybe a white accountant drifts past your doors in a storm and you get a drink. Like, you know, just like old crusty Nosferatu Dracula bullshit. And, you know, my friends would always be like, oh, but vampires fuck. And I was like, yeah, maybe. This was the first movie I watched where I was like, fuck, I want to fuck all the vampires. I was like, I'm feeling things right now. Like, these guys explode off the screen in coolness.
Yeah.
Like, one of the scenes that struck me is these guys still just tear ass around on motorcycles, right? That scene when Michael chases them and he's, you know, Kiefer has the great line. He's like an awesome, you know, leader of the gang. He's so great. But there's that moment where, you know, Michael's just like, I can't beat your bike. And he's like, you don't have to beat us, Michael. Just try to keep up. In that moment of them just driving through the beach and having this kind of euphoric fun, right? It's like just pure ecstasy into the chicken. And it's one of those moments in the movie where you stop and you're like, wait a sec, I've already seen another great thing they added is the fucking predatory swoop, right? The flying and swooping down, pulling people into the sky, ripping cars. It makes them scary, fast, ferocious, present vampires, right? And so that all works. And then you're sitting there and you're like, why are they fucking just riding dirt bikes? Like, how is that fun when you can just fly? And it's because they want everyone else to see how much fun they're having that they can't have. And you're like, that is cool, right? These are vampires who now are fucking flaunting it in our face. They're not the cursed, rotting undead. They're out here fucking loving it. That's a really cool thing
that's
to see.
the thing that I love. That's the great thing. Like, that scene where they're hanging off the train tracks is a great example. Like, that to me is like the crystallization of a lot of this movie is Jason Patric's reactions in that scene where, like, Michael is watching, and David's just almost taunting him the entire time. Like, while they're holding on, like, don't let go. And, like, then all of a sudden they're all just letting go. Like, that to me is the shit that I'm just like, that's what this movie's about, is not necessarily about how cool vampires are, because honestly, like, that comes through, that oozes off the screen. But this is mainly about Michael's journey of attempting to be cool, like putting on a show to be cool. And eventually, you know, figures out his own shit. But, like, that is, like, I love the use of vampirism in this movie, particularly because it's the metaphor for moving. It's the metaphor for moving to a new place and having to fit in and all that other kind of shit that comes with. Listen, I moved a lot when I was a kid. I moved a lot of different places, and I understand that feeling of, like, trying to find your group, trying to find your clique, trying to find your people. It's like the lunch table in the cafeteria all over again, but it's just like a 90-minute movie about it.
Well, what I like is
that's
the way
what's so great.
But I think what it does is I like the way it takes vampirism, right? And so instead of the curse, like, yes, I'm alive, but I can't enjoy life. This is the classic maxim, right? You've always heard that from, like, old fucking people, which is youth is wasted on the young. And this movie really says that, you know, what if you gave this, because it's like you'll never grow old, you'll never die, all you have to do is feed. And in a way, you just say that out loud, you're like, yeah, that's teenagers and vampires. That's their mindset. So it really is just taking these people at this moment of, when you're a teenager, everything's high drama, everything's important, everything is a battle worth fighting, you know, and it's just this perfect moment to take when people are most alive, to then afflict them with this curse of vampirism. It's a whole new way to examine this kind of monster that we haven't really had before.
Well, I mean, it makes it, again, it's what you're saying. It makes it not a curse. Like, it's a curse only if you look at it that way. And I think that's like, it's the optimism of youth marrying with this eternal life. So if you're going to take somebody when they're young, why would they not embrace the fact that they're young forever? Like, again, I mean, listen, I think you and I can both agree that there is some aspects of our lives that we wish that we were still young for. I absolutely do. That's just part of life. Everybody does that. There is that like level of nostalgia where you go, oh man, I was so young and I was ready for anything. And now look at me. This is my life now. Like, that's the best part about this version of vampirism, which is like, it's the version where you're like, wow, you could live forever like that. Like, you could just be some fucking hot, cool dude with a fucking mohawk running around on bikes all the time. There's something about that is
just the very notion of when we see them as a gang, they're always having fun, it seems like.
They're having a great time.
You know,
absolutely.
It's not this like, oh, we're afraid of David, he's our leader. They feel like just a gang of dudes having a blast. And a lot of time what they're doing is not cool. Right? Like a great example, like the first time we see them, it's like, here are these immortal vampires gifted with, you know, predatory powers and flight. They're just trolling the carousel.
Yeah.
You know, like
not endorsing behavior, but definitely cool. All right.
But that's what I mean. It's such a weird, that's what I mean. Like it strikes me as you would see other vampire movies and they'd be like, oh, a carnival, a bold fox. I imagine all vampires are like how Werner Herzog is in it. He's like, oh, the boardwalk. This is the glowing sign of futility of human mortals. Oh, why throw balls at the milk jugs when life is so finite, right? Like, that's what I think a vampire would do if he saw, like, that boardwalk. These guys were like, fuck yeah, carousel! You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I fucking love that. It just changed that lens. So all of a sudden, a story that, you know, felt very distant to me my whole life, this monster who I'd seen in countless movies, right? Vampires. Now it felt, I got it all of a sudden. I got why you'd want to be a vampire watching this movie. And I don't know. I thought, I mean, that's what I mean, though. I think that is the strength of the movie is there isn't a throwaway character in the whole movie. And that, I mean, I guess you could argue like the three vampire henchmen are essentially all one character. So fine, they're your body count character, but every character who has true speaking lines, there's not really a throwaway. And that's pretty rare for most movies.
Even the throwaway, like those three guys all have their own unique vibe. And I think that's, again, a really important thing about, it's another really important thing about pacing in this movie and like pacing out your characters. Because again, the four people I'm drawn to the entire movie are obviously like Corey Haim, Jason Patric, Jamie Gertz, and Kiefer Sutherland. Those are the four people I'm locked in with the entire movie. I know I'm going to be locked in with them. But peppering your cast with people like George Herman, Corey Feldman, whoever the other kid is in that group, and then like Alex Winter and the other two guys, like those people, those actors are always great in their own right, and giving them the room to do something like that and just let them be their own character is what makes them not just like one note character in the background. Like, it's not just a body count character. That's what it's there for, but they all have their own unique thing. And I think that's what makes this movie so great. And again, going back to our other point about just, you know, making things seem cool, like everybody seems like they serve a purpose. And that's, I think, a really valuable thing, especially in like movies about gangs, is there's always the throwaway guy who's just like, oh, that extra who showed up to set one day looks like one of these guys, so we'll just keep him in the background. They don't need any of that because all these guys are giving a performance. It's really cool, and it's really fun to watch, and it makes the movie engaging the entire time.
Well, it's just like they pepper in constantly, you know. The grandpa has this real, like, he's just such a well-written character for essentially someone who does not matter in the movie once until the very last scene, and you realize he's in on it. You know, where but it's just like his shelf in the fridge, right? This is the old fart shelf. This is where I keep my root beers and my my fucking Oreos and I'm going to go try to plow old ladies and do taxidermy. You're like, that's a great role and that's just good writing. You know, like he's literally just there to be the guy that gives them the house. But think about it. He actually serves no purpose in the, if you plucked him out of the house, right? And the story was he died and they inherited the home.
Mm-hmm.
The movie doesn't change a bit. The movie, like you could pull him out of the movie and the narrative would not collapse. To me, that is the absolute hallmark of a useless character. Yet, he is one of the most fun, awesome parts of the movie. And so that is what I always look at. I mean, I guess the only character you're like, but even then, like, Laddie doesn't really serve a lot of a point, but he has a great scene at the end. And also he kind of highlights this predatory nature of our head vampire finding children. Right. So, you know, there kind of is a Peter Pan vibe at a point with these lost children running amok, right? But that's what I mean. Every character just has these extra flares. Like, I really like Diane Weiss this time watching, right? The mom really leapt off the screen this time at me. It was just such a fun performance from her.
I'd say actually, I mean, and again, I know he ends up being one of the big bads at the end. I mean, I said it's not George, Edward Herman at the end of the movie ended up like the big reveal, which again is one of my like favorite reveals in movies, and I always forget. And then I'm like watching, I'm like, oh my God, yeah, totally. This is so like, I'm like, oh fuck, this is so good. And again, it's one of those great moments where all of these other like sort of bits about vampirism get sort of subverted throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. And then the one that I think everybody kind of forgets about a lot of the time, which is you can't like vampires can't do anything unless you invite them in. That
which is
one
wrong.
of those things that
the one dude literally explodes through the chimney.
Well,
he's just like, "What's up, motherfucker?" Yeah, you know, like a fucking kung fu kick.
Sure, I'm not saying that in general it's not a possibility to subvert the rules.
I think
but again,
like
it's one of those great.
The dinner
bits.
with Max is amazing because this is where they've set us up, right? So we see, you know, his brother is going through it. Mike's going through it, right? He has the see-through shadow. He's become the faceless, shadowy brother. That shot of him like storming up the stairs. Or actually skulking, right? Storming's the wrong word. He's like skulking up the stairs. When Nanook, the ass whipper, just takes him down. These are great scenes, right? Then we see the healing. We see the, you know, sexy floating through the clouds. So like we're like, vampire rules. We got rules. Blah, 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 right? The Frog Brothers little book that they made. You know, like, this will save your life, Mr. Phoenix. You know, the vampires everywhere. That's a classic riff. Just these two dipshit kids that have no knowledge, but they want it to be, and then it manifests. It's like The Secret
one of my favorite
as
scenes.
a comic book.
When they hand him the comic book, like Kill All Vampires, he's like, think of it more as an instruction manual. I'm like, God bless you.
This might save your life, bro. But that's
like, but that's like, that's always the experience. That's the thing I love about this movie particularly is that's the experience that you always hope you see, but never have to deal with in a comic book shop. Like whenever you go in, like you and I have done this many times where we go in and someone just like interjects themselves into a conversation we're having. We're like, oh, shut the fuck up. Do not talk to me anymore.
To be fair, we're not the Frog Brothers, whereas we're like, what's up, Phoenix?
We're not. I'm not talking about us. I'm saying
we're like
the fools who do that.
Stealthy Frog Brothers, right? Like the Toad Brothers. Like we'll hear someone and then be like, listen to this fucking guy. Like, so we'll do it just like to ourselves, like a grown.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'd say we're closer to like MSTK 3000. Like that's like our like MST. Yeah, whatever. MST3K, like that's closer to what we're doing in comic book shops. But I love.
Were you going for like cool points doing the Mystery Science Theater abbreviation?
No.
Is that what you were just saying? Mystery Science Theater?
I just didn't want to say Mystery Science Theater 3000. Sorry. Either way.
That's like when my cousin came home and she's like, oh, you don't listen to NKOTB? And I was like,
what's that?
What? New Kids on the Block? She just said it to me like I was some kind of fucking moron. For not knowing who NKOTV was. That's a similar experience you just gave me. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyways, but yeah, that's closer to our vibe than we're nearing the Frog Brothers. I feel like most of the time when we've been in comic shops
probably
together,
more
we
of
have
a Corey
to deal
Haim.
with the Frog Brothers.
You're probably more of the
Haim.
Corey Haim, and I'm more of a Feldman.
You're not a Feldman. Not in my experience.
I'm not macho enough to be Feldman of the Frogs in this one.
Maybe like Feldman when he's like a rock star when he's older. Like,
if there was truly a character in this movie that I feel like I'm trending towards, it is the grandpa. I was like, he has a lot of picadillos, and I'm like, this feels like where I might like land.
Yeah,
like this is where I could end up.
I think that just comes with you're not aging. You're aging like a fine wine. That's the whole thing.
Or something like that. I hope I could still be slinging it when I'm that old. That's cool. No, but where we got up? Oh yeah, so we're talking about the rules of vampirisms before we got thrown off by my new kid on the block, PTSD. Another abbreviation for you there. NKOTB PSD. So the rules of the vampire in this movie are pretty fun because I was watching it this time and you're like, it's undeniable, right? Everyone in the audience knows right away that Max is 100% going to be the head vampire, right?
Yes.
The very first time we see him, right? He's kind of scooping this lady helping a baby. He's just handing out suckers. It's like, dude, you're a video store, not a doctor's office, first off. That's fucking weird. He's like, hey, what's up, girl? Sucker. And then the guys come into his store and he's like, get out of here. I told you not to be seen around here. And you're like, all right, this guy does not look like he's going to be laying down ultimatums very much, right? So you're like, that's weird. There's actually a scene that I had forgotten about, which is where Max comes home. It's dark. Mm-hmm. His dog Thorn, right, is growling. A bat kite, very on the nose, flies up to him. He picks it up and he sees the motorcycle, like the wind motorcycle riders, right?
Right.
Which we know are the vampires.
Right.
The next thing we see is Thorn is like fighting off the mom. He's become possibly a hellhound. And then he just shows up to fucking dinner. After Corey and the Frogs have said they think he might be the guy. The fact that he shows up unscathed, you know for a fact he's the head vampire. But what they do is they subvert all of our rules, right? Which is he has a reflection, he's not glowing, he likes garlic, this and that. They actually fix it, though, at the very end. Because I was watching, I was like, this is so stupid. Like, none of these rules make sense. Like, so Michael just can drive a car to the cliff in the sun. One bit of sunlight touches David, and he's like, ah! And he does the one sad tear, right? Sunrise, sundown. Right? With this one sad tear.
Like the one, it's like the one tear, yeah.
So you're sitting there watching, you're like, none of these vampire rules make any sense. Right? Like, we see the vampires actually have psychic powers. They have fucking mind control with the worms and the rice. So you're like, none of this makes sense. But at the very end, Max has that great line where he's like, never let a vampire in, then you have no power. Like, the rules don't apply. And I was like, what a brilliant stroke of screenwriting.
That's what I was talking about earlier. Like,
just in case.
Right, that's what I was talking about earlier. Is like that. Everyone forgets about that rule about the invitation, and then I love that the extension of the rule is like, yeah, that's when you have anything else that could kill them is not available to you.
Yeah,
I fucking love that that's like part of this, and I love that that's the case because you're right. It's a great screenwriting bit to just like write your way out of it.
Yeah, right.
But on top of that, and again, I know that Edward Herrmann's going to end up being that guy. I know that Max is going to end up being the big one. But at the same time, I just like, and it's weird, like I kind of figured it, like you figure it out pretty much immediately, but you sort of get lost in the story. And then at the end, again, I was just like, oh, wait, he's the guy, isn't he? Like, again, it's one of those great, like, it's one of those great recollections. And you're just like, oh, okay, yeah. And then he is just like the goofiest, nicest looking guy in so many movies. So it's weird when he becomes so fucking menacing. Mm-hmm. You're like, I don't understand why Richie Rich's dad is being such a dick. Like, there's just like this level of
1%ers, am I right?
Man, 0.1 percenters.
Fucking rich white people, dude. God damn it. Yeah, we need more of those boardwalk people.
But no, you're right. Like, Max's whole thing is so much fun, and it really does make this movie that much more enjoyable. It's almost like, it almost gives you a little bit of levity, to be honest with you. Because, like, by the end, this movie is getting pretty heavy and getting pretty dangerous for our main characters. The Max reveal kind of gives you this, like, almost wink and a charm in a lot of aspects for me.
Well, it's also by the time we get to that house assault, right? We have that very cool like Home Alone montage where like they're getting ready for war, which I think is splendid, right? That's just cool.
It's great.
It just works. But once the vampires actually start attacking, you're like, you're not super engaged in the fact like, oh, I'm worried for my characters. You just want it to be a fun payoff. You just don't want it to be bad, right? And this is what they did. They just made it fun, right? The different ways to kill vampires is very good, right? Death by stereo. Yeah, like you said, the pool. These are great deaths. Like even Kiefer's death, you're like, that death kind of sucks. It's very anticlimactic for how cool Kiefer's been. But they play it really well, right? Where Schumacher does that kind of spotlight, almost this angelic lighting on him. Thou shalt not die. And it's like, we get it. You know, you're really like smacking us around with fucking Highway to Heaven imagery. But then all of a sudden we move in on Kiefer. And instead of the fucking high cheekboned yellow eyes, and instead of the baggy eyes like chain smoking Kiefer we saw before, he actually kind of just looks like an angelic teenager. And there's almost a faint hint of a smile that maybe he was ready for this to be done. Which, you know, again, that kind of comes back to the core of the vampirism as a curse. But it's a really subtle way, you know, just for him at the end. He's like, dude, my buddies died. Like, these are actually people I cared about and not minions. And maybe he's just, I'd rather die than spend more time with Michael. He's just like, fucking kill me. And it's, but that's what I mean. It's like, it's not, because you could look at that and be like, well, that is just not nearly cool enough for someone as awesome as David is in this movie, but it still really works. It still really worked for me.
Well, I mean, again, it takes all of the vampirism things. It does such a good job of not just taking shit out to pasture. Like, we're not watching Twilight here where everyone just sparkles and is able to survive. Like, what you're doing.
I wondered how long it'd take to get a Twilight dig in.
I mean, it was not necessary. I mean, look, every movie does their own thing. Every story does their own thing. I mean, to me personally, I just don't get why. Whatever. That's another movie. But what I like the most about the Lost Boys' approach to vampirism is that there are these addendums and there are these things that work for their storytelling that feel authentic, not necessarily just like, oh, we're throwing this last bit in right now. Like, oh, if you invite a vampire in, they're all powerful and also everything that could kill them is totally useless. Like, that doesn't feel inauthentic or like an add-on to get you out of a jam in a story. What it feels like is that you're taking the myth and you're building on it. Like, you're doing the work to tell a better story. And I think that's what makes the Lost Boys worth coming back to and worth watching over and over again. Yeah, I mean, it's just they never get in their own way, right? They're never more worried about mythology than entertainment. Totally. And again, I think it's just this thrill ride that it makes me feel young again when I watch it. You know, and there's just this fucking, and a lot of Schumacher movies have that. There's just this electric vibrance that just flows from the screen to you. And I do think this is his best movie to me. Because I think this is just this perfect capsulation of what he did so well, which is, you know, building these characters through quirkiness. He's made this wildly fun world for us to play in. And it's got this fucking high energy. Like, it is completely imbued with the stuff that makes life worth living. And I mean, it's just cool. And again, like, even getting Corey Haim, that's that kind of thing that Joel Schumacher could get by. Like, right, when you watch this kind of movie, you're expecting Mikey from the Goonies, right? Like this little, I'm an all-American tough lad, right? But this time it's like Mikey wakes up and is like solving the problems of his brother being a vampire in a shirt that says, Born to Shop, with like a Molly Ringwald poster in the background, right? And I know a lot of people, like everyone's like, oh, I've cracked the movie, is that Corey Haim's character is gay. And that a lot of the vampire thing is him coming up. There's a whole thing about the mom, like, I could never sleep in an open closet. Like, begging her son to not fucking come out of the closet. And I was like, even take that aside, right? Like, what it is that all of that is there. But he's just this really, like, I mean, the scene that everyone talks about is the bathtub scene. Which is another one of those, you're like,
that feels like a scene that should be like, wait, what's happening? But it's perfect. It actually becomes really charming. You know, like I love the bathtub scene because it just shows you that this kid is out there trying to like be in the world and go to comic shops and like tough talk people about Batman number 7s or whatever. But really, he's just this fucking kid who wants to sing along and do rub-a-dub in the tub. And it just really works. That's what is so weird is that everything in the movie that feels the strangest and most out of place just fits so perfect. What do you make of Corey Haim in this flick, right? Like the way that he is brought to us. What did that do for you in this movie?
Corey Haim to me in this movie has always been like when you're younger, like when you're in like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, Corey Haim's this is a weird way to put it. Corey Haim's the final boy you always want to be, you know? Like
the final boy. What? Is this like a final girl adjacent? Is that what we're talking about?
I don't know how else to put it. Well, we've already gone over that when we did Nightmare on Elm Street. But like I don't know how else to put it, to be honest with you. Like Corey Haim to me is that kind of kid with the gumption, the out-of-town kid with the gumption to not just go with the crowd. And I think that's the thing that I like the most about his character. And that was the thing when I was younger and I saw it. Like I saw this movie not when I was too young, but I saw it when I was old enough. Like I was probably like 15 or 16 the first time I saw this movie, which again, like it's not a movie I sought out when I was younger. But when I saw it, I related a lot to Corey Haim's character simply because that was me a lot of the time when we were moving. Like I would be the weird kid who would ask about the movies or comics or any of the things that I like to talk about or any things I like to like carry on about. But I also had the wherewithal to know when to walk away and that kind of thing. And again, he's just the extension of who you want to be when you're that age. And I think that's the thing that I like the most. He's like the best version of that kind of character, like the little brother character. He's the best version of that where he's not helpless. Yeah. He wants to be involved. He wants to go. Like him helping his older brother, like that kind of shit. That's the kind of stuff
some
that
of those scenes with him and Mike are just some of the best, right?
Totally.
Like when he's just 100%. Like, you're still my brother. Like, it's just, what I love about him in this movie, right? I think the subtlety of taking Corey Haim in this movie and saying it's not this just traditional like masculinity that makes him so awesome. That like he is the kid who walks around wearing whatever the fuck that is he's wearing at the start of the movie. You know, I remember that era of fashion kind of, but like, you know, wasn't my era per se. So whatever the fuck he's wearing though, when he walks in, you match that up against the Frog Brothers. And you're like, oh shit, like of course these guys are going to get on him and razz him. But he holds his own and enough to where they offer him the book, right? Like they see something in this kid. And so you pair these, like that hilarious scene when they're filling up holy water, right? And it's just, you know, this kind of like really nice dressed, you know, cool kid and these two fucking rough and tumble butch kids. In that he just wins him over, right? That there's not just this, you know, it's because he's a man doing manly stuff. And his older brother's like, stop being a puss. Let's fight vampires. Puss, grab the weights. It's just he has this incredible strength of just who he is, right? And again, I think those little subtleties to, you know, perhaps his sexuality or whatever like that, it's just a good thing to throw in at a time when you didn't see a lot of that stuff. Like we talked about that in Back to the Future. One of the things that makes Marty McFly so cool is that he's just the short, not exceptionally cool, not the jock, not the class president. He's just kind of this little guy doing the best he can, trying to just have a girlfriend, and that makes it fun for those of us that don't relate to those
kinds of characters, like those everyman characters that you get to take the journey with. Those are the ones that I think that's the reason they endure, is because everyone has been there. Everyone's been that person. Not everyone's been Jason Patrick. Okay? Not everyone's been Michael Emerson. Not everyone's been a tufted haired teen who can just stare down some broad during a saxophone concert and just like be like, hey, let's do this. That's another thing that everyone points out too regarding Sam's sexuality, is because he's staring at Jamie Gertz, like he's staring at Star in the crowd, and Sam redirects his head towards the saxophone guy, like, check out this greased up dude playing sax. And I'm like, who gives a shit? Like, honestly, it's like the least important moment in a movie ever.
Well, I think
he's just a little brother.
I would imagine though there were people that meant a lot to. And again, I think it's just a cool. And it gets back to what Schumacher does best, which is he finds these small ways to just make the characters more and more complex. And honestly, I was
not
like,
to
if I was
besmirch
at that
that
concert,
notion, by the way.
If you were at that concert, you have to be like, this is not gonna happen often. Right? Unless that guy just like lives there. Like when he's not saxophoning, he's outside of the arcade like, hey, who's got $1 for a Surge?
Right. I mean,
I need a Surge soda. Like, but you're like, something special is happening on that stage. You need to watch.
You have to watch what's going on right here. This guy has a ponytail, he's playing saxophone, and he's shirtless and he's just rocking, and everyone is vibing this whole show. Like
everyone.
And again, look,
he literally brings together the fucking circus like menagerie of like human whatevers in this crowd, and everyone is united in one moment.
Right.
By
and
Saxman.
If Sam Emerson's sexuality is important to you in this movie, I think that's fine. I don't want to bag on that at all. I just do think that, like, to me, the character, like, it's almost inconsequential because, again, he's that everyman Marty McFly guy that we can all graft onto for the movie. Again, I don't know who would personally, like, I don't relate to Mike's story. Like, I know that we follow him a lot, but like I always gravitate towards Sam because that's always who I was.
I think that's the thing is there are a lot more guys that relate to Sam where it's, we're trying to project cool. Maybe there's something about us that, we're not exposing it. Like I think Mike, I would imagine if we talk to our gay listeners, they would have like a different how much that meant to them thing, right? When I watch Mike, the older brother, I'm just like, yeah, I never got to look at a girl that good looking, and she immediately was just like, the vapors. I will turn in my whole.
I never had that experience either.
Right? Like, I will turn in the coven and fucking be on Kiefer Sutherland's bad side because of a glance at you. Like Mike means nothing to me in this movie, and also there's only one time when I relate to Mike, which is when he's like, I saw a girl and she rode off with some tough biker guys. He's like, maybe I should go get a jacket and an earring and take a shot. And I was like, you're chasing. You're a chaser. I was like, I've been that. I've been the chaser before. You know what I mean? For sure, I've done that.
I mean, yeah, of course. Everybody's been the chaser for sure.
But yeah, I just like to be that guy. That's not an everyman kind of role.
Right. But that's why Corey Haim's character is so important because he regrounds the entire story. If we only had Jason Patric to glob onto, I think this movie is a completely different movie, but also like suffers from that fact entirely.
Well, it's
not nearly as
weird,
classic and timeless without Corey Haim's character.
Absolutely. But it becomes this almost weird movie where all of the characters are so cool and so crafted out that you don't use any of them as an avatar.
Well,
you just feel like
I think
you can sit amongst them as yourself.
It's almost like, if you take out Corey Haim and Feldman and I can never remember the other guy's fucking name, the real guy,
the other frog bro,
the other frog brother. If you take those three guys out of the movie, what you get is honestly what you get is like Less Than Zero. Remember we watched Less Than Zero? Less Than Zero is the same thing where it's like, those people live a life that I have no fucking clue what it is about. Yeah. And like you get like Less Than Zero with like gutter punks.
But
and that's like your life.
In Less Than Zero, you don't care emotionally about any. You're like, so what's the biggest thing you're facing? Going back and doing drug rehab in your mansion? Like, it's one of those movies where it's like, oh, it's so hard to be rich and have everything that I'm going to go on a drug bender.
Right.
And it's like
this one, but it's basically, it's the scummier version of that. It's like, oh, it's so tough to be living immortal and as a young person and just loving life and enjoying the hell out of it. It is,
but this one is actually filled with, like the two brothers, the single mom.
I'm saying without
even Max being like, I'm just trying to get a date and, not be addicted. Like it has all these really good little emotional hallmarks. Like even Grandpa, when they come back carrying two bodies in blankets, and Grandpa's like, do you remember to fill up the car with gas? And you're like, to stop the movie and do that, again, it doesn't truly serve a purpose except for to flesh out this world. And I love that kind of stuff.
Right, I do too. That's what the whole,
and
great
that's what
movies,
separates it from those others. Yeah.
And if we're being honest, like, this is what makes great Joel Schumacher movies, is those little moments. So this is something he's really good at doing in his movies. Like, we saw that in Flatliners. Falling Down's a great example of that too. And I mean, even Batman Forever and Batman
even
and
Phone
Robin
Booth. Everyone
Phone Booth is another one.
Phone Booth is anchored into one tiny room, and you just meet these, weird characters coming up to this booth, and there's the guy on the phone. That's what I mean. He's great at. He never misses a moment. Right? If there's a small, quiet, like, throwaway moment, right, where you need to move plot or move something, he always finds a way to have the character add to who they are while moving things forward. And that gets missed by a lot of people.
We never get stopped in our tracks to get a good character moment from a Joel Schumacher movie. But I think what I'm saying is that without the anchor of Corey Haim and the Frog Brothers, if you lose that, like if you take those characters out of the movie completely and you rewrite the movie, I think those emotional beats are almost stripped of some of their varnish, just because you don't care nearly as much about the mom, because obviously if the mom's not paying attention to the fact that her kid's becoming a fucking vampire, she didn't care enough. She's not paying attention to anything.
Are you saying that this poor, beaten down, divorcee single mom who had to go work for fucking hip-ass Max at a video store is a little bit not good enough because her son, who just moved to California, looks like he walked off a magazine, may or may not be doing droogs? I think that is an unfair criticism to levy.
Well, what I'm saying is that if Corey Haim and the Frog Brothers aren't in this movie, if there's no Sam Emerson, you lose a lot of that emotional value. Yes,
I already told you, my anchor is Grandpa, so I'll be fine. He is the man I'm slowly becoming. No, that's what, that to me is what it is, right? Is that the movie itself becomes vampiric to me, which is I do always feel like I can't grow old and die if I'm watching this movie. I feel full of life and fun, and the characters are fucking outstanding. I mean, just to end the movie, right? We have this big bad at the end, and it's like, oh, we need some mythological, how do you defeat a monster? Grandpa just somehow knows to fucking smash in his, front wall and his front door, and, like, hopefully I'll stake him. And then he just walks away and just gets a root beer and is like, fucking vampires. And you're like, yes. Fade to black.
That's the fucking movie, man.
And that small scene at the end, right, is perfect. It's like, don't worry too much about the mythology. Don't worry about planning. Just make it exciting. Throw an explosion. Awesome character beat.
Awesome. That's it.
And you're like, it's a perfect way to end Lost Boys, because that's what it is. It's just these.
I don't want to know anything about those characters' lives beyond that moment. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, well, you can imagine. I mean, they've made sequels to the Lost Boys.
Sure.
None of which
again,
are
like I said,
good.
I don't need to know anything about those characters beyond that last beat.
You don't care about 40-year-old Frog coming back?
Yeah, believe it or not a draw for me to the Lost Boys franchise.
Yeah, not a draw. But yeah, guys, that's it for the movie. But yeah, it's one of those days. It just like the Lost Boys. Yeah, you kind of just got to stop for a second, man. And it is weird because we're getting to that age where we're going to start losing people that made the things that meant a lot to our childhood. And, just thinking of the Lost Boys, I think back to what my friend John said. And it's just like, it was a bonding moment between him and his little friends where it's like they became a little gang of kids who, like, if you like the Lost Boys, you're cool to us. If you don't know the Lost Boys, buzz up. And it's just, it's hard to swallow that, we won't see another Joel Schumacher movie. It's hard to swallow, but that is kind of the great thing about, these directors and artists that, come along and give us these fucking great pieces of work. Like, I already know, like, it'll be one of my great days, and hopefully, knock on wood, I'll live long enough to share this with my kids. Yes. It's just one of those, that is the great thing, is that we'll always have the work, but it's really sad to think that, the guy is not with us anymore, man.
It is. The man who gave us Flatliners and the Platitudes.
That's what I mean. Like, so many movies that we love. And again, it's like we said earlier, it's these guys who made these movies that just they light your fucking heart on fire. And you're like, that's why we wanted to do a podcast about movies. As you know, partially Joel Schumacher is responsible for that.
Totally.
So yeah, man, all we can do is just thank him, for his stuff. Hope that
Thank you,
everyone who
Joel.
loved him is okay, and that he will be remembered fondly as he deserves, man. So The Lost Boys was a fantastic time at the movies. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. Please take a second, leave us a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcast app. You can see our
Very
faces
helpful.
on YouTube, Nerd Alchemist, plural with an S at the end. Find us on all your social medias. Email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com, and tell us what movies you'd like to hear us talk about. We're always taking suggestions. For the Film Alchemist, I'm Josh Griffey.
I'm Alex Dandino.